And so I think maybe this is a hot take, but I don't think it's bad to be into. What is up, guys? My name is Tequila, and welcome back to the Wonderfully Made in Christ YouTube channel. I'm so glad you are here. If you are new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you do not miss out every single time I upload a video. And if you end up enjoying this video, I make videos about lifestyle, faith, a vlog here and there, just sharing my life. If any of that floats your boat or interests you, subscribe and also hit the like button to show me that you're enjoying this video and you're enjoying this content. And without further ado, let's get into the video. So today we're going to be talking about what kind of can be a touchy subject for some, and that is the topic of depression. So in case you guys didn't know, I love talking about mental health. I definitely try to be an advocate of mental health. My degree actually is in psychology, and then also I have a master's degree in clinical and mental health counseling. So all of that is a part of my background. I don't actively practice anymore, so I'm not in that field anymore. But it is a part of my background. So it's something that I'm very passionate about. And it's something I would say I do have some knowledge on. I'm not an expert, I would say, but it's something I do have, I would say, a little bit of knowledge on. Okay, so depression. I think I'm going to put a couple of definitions that of depression that I have found from the internet. But for me, I feel like depression is something that's kind of hard for me to specifically put into a definition, because I feel like sometimes when we do that, we unintentionally offend people when we do that, because there are, there's a lot of people who, when they're feeling down or sad or bummed, they may use the word depressed, and I know that can be offensive to a lot of people. I want to look to both sides. I don't feel that most people who are using depression in that way or trying to use it in a way that is offensive or anything, but I do know, for people who struggle with depression and that it's a very ongoing thing for them, I know for some people they can take it in a way that is offensive. So I want to speak to both sides of that. However, what I want to say is because of that, it's kind of hard for me to describe and fully define what depression is. I think hopefully I will put in what the DSM says depression is, the definition of that, just because that's a respected resource in the community of clinical mental health. So I think it does have some weight. So because of that, I'm probably going to put that somewhere in the video. But also, one thing I've found when I have looked up before, definition of depression, is it's often tied to sadness, and not just sadness, but ongoing sadness, feelings of hopelessness, being in the depths of despair. However, my main concern with that is that ultimately I think depression is more than sadness. I feel like depression is when we get to a state where we feel numb emotionally and we're not sure how we're going to come back from that. That is the definition that speaks most truly to me ultimately. Not that sadness is not a part of it, because I feel like in some ways it can be, but I feel like depression is a level that is past sadness ultimately. So also I want to say, if you are in that boat and you are struggling with depression right now, so if you're in a state of hopelessness, loss, despair, if you really feel like you don't feel a way out, please, ultimately get help. Go to counseling, find some type of resource that is ultimately going to be helpful for you. Also, if you're a believer, because this is a Christian channel, I would encourage you to, talk to your pastor or some type of spiritual leader who you trust and who you feel like will be helpful. And even talk to your loved ones, maybe your mom or dad, or a good trusted friend. But don't suffer in silence and don't suffer alone ultimately. So I just had to say that before I go on anymore. So yeah, as we just talked about, A lot of definitions out there of depression are tied to sadness, but ultimately, as I mentioned before, the definition that rings most true to me is like a feeling of like numbness, hopelessness, and just overall despair. So I want to give you guys some questions to ask yourself if you think that you might be in a depression right now. That might be helpful for you to be able to more easily self-reflect. And also, I want to say too, there's different levels of depression. There is like the lowest of the low, where trigger warning. You're in a place where you feel like you're at the bottom and you feel like you cannot get out. There's that level, and then there's also, as we're going to talk about a little bit later, either in this video or I might make a part 2 to this, is seasonal depression. And I probably will put some definitions of seasonal depression on the screen too. So I feel like seasonal depression is a little bit different. It's not necessarily, I would say, more of maybe the imbalance that people have when it comes to kind of an ongoing battle of like clinical depression. A lot of times seasonal depression is affected by, the seasons. So like as we get into winter, things get darker, times get colder, and because of that can also throw off people's moods as well. So we're probably going to talk about that a little bit later. But right now we're going to focus on some questions to ask yourself if you feel like you are in a depression right now. One more thing. Also, I want to say too, sometimes I feel like depression, every person's different, but hear me out. I feel like there are times where sometimes depression can go away ultimately. I just want to say, I know that is not the case for everyone. And if you've struggled for a long time, like, I just want to say, like, I really am sorry that is the situation that you're in. I hope that you're getting some help. And I'm praying for you right now that that'll be a situation, hopefully, that you're able to overcome in some way, shape, or form. But also, I want to speak to other people too. There are people who overcome depression. For some people, it's not a lifelong thing. There's some people who have bouts of it, and then ultimately, it kind of goes away, or they don't have it as strongly anymore. That's actually one thing I learned in psychology, is sometimes people get it in not just like seasonal depression, but they get it in people who have depression or struggle with it. Maybe not every day, but who are more prone to struggling with it will have bouts of it throughout their lifetime. So you might be in a depressive episode right now, but a little bit later you might be out of that ultimately. So speaking from my own experience, I had a situation when I was younger, years ago, where I, felt just like that numbness and just that despair, and I just wasn't in a good place. But ultimately, I'm really not in that season anymore. And even as time went on, like the following year, I did much better than I did before. So I just hope that gives you guys some encouragement, is that I do believe it is something that you can overcome a lot of times with help, and you can go on to live like a happy, fulfilled, healthy life. Okay, question number 1 I want you to ask yourself is, what am I feeding myself? Like physically, like what am I eating, what am I putting into my body, but also spiritually, what am I feeding myself? Like what am I watching? What am I listening to? What am I reading? Because I personally am a firm believer in like what you choose to set your mind on, your emotions follow that ultimately. And so I really used to be into just like kind of like sad things. I know that's weird to some people, but I know some of y'all kind of understand what I'm talking about. My mom, she just thinks that she does not like that I do that. But ultimately, I don't know, I just really kind of like sad movies, like The Notebook and A Walk to Remember, like sad songs, breakup songs. It's just kind of my thing. I don't know why I'm like that exactly, but I like emotional things like that. Even on Spotify, on my my end of the year playlist, it was saying, I might insert a picture of that too, you like emotional music like more than the average person. And I was like, bruh, called out. But also this year too, kind of, I don't know. I was kind of, there's a reason I feel like I was listening to like more emotional music because this year has been, or this past year, I don't know. It was like kind of an outlet for me. So also some of that just had to do with what was going on in my own life. But ultimately, no, apart from that, I've always kind of been like that. And so I think maybe this is a hot take, but I don't think it's bad to be into sad things. If a movie or a show is happy all the time, I think that's fine ultimately. Like, I think there's a time and a place for that. But ultimately, like, our hearts, we are a cluster of so many different emotions. Happiness, sadness, excitement, joy, grief, loneliness. And so I feel like there needs to be media that is able to relate to the depths of a person's heart. And I mean, there's a reason why so many of us are just so enamored with so many movies that are sad, and maybe don't have a happy ending, but there's something that draws us to that. Like there's reasons why all these Nicholas Sparks movies that are so sad are so popular. There's reasons why things like The Fault in Our Stars, all of Taylor Swift's breakup songs, all of Adele's sad song, there's a reason why we're drawn to that. And it speaks to a deeper level of our hearts ultimately, which is necessary. Like we can't live in a world that is just so happy-go-lucky all the time, because ultimately we all have traumas, we all have sadness, we all have things ultimately that have happened to us or we're dealing with that, are not a picture of happiness. And so when we hear something that relates to that, it's like, whoa, if we feel like someone else kind of gets it, like when we listen to like a song maybe that's sad, or when we watch a movie that also connects to like the deeper levels of like our hearts and our emotions. So personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with like watching a sad movie or reading a sad book, or even that. I was reading some sad books too in my childhood. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. However, if you're overly focused on that, as I think I mentioned earlier, what you set your mind on, your heart will follow. So if that's all you're kind of watching, or if that's what you're mainly consuming, your emotions might drift more towards the sad than the joy and the happy. So just be careful, because that's something I realized too. I was like, why am I so sad? Why am I so bummed all the time? Like, why am I this? Why am I being so negative? And then I was thinking, like, I'm sitting here like listening to all these sad songs, and I'm just overly focused on that. That's the thing. If you're overly focused on that, that's kind of also not healthy. So yeah, ask yourself, like, what are you feeding yourself that's maybe causing you to drift more towards focusing on the negative and the sad ultimately. I feel like this can do with people too. Are the people in your life and in your sphere, are they feeding you life, or are they feeding you death? Like who's your circle of friends? When you're around them, are they always like gossiping and like talking bad about other people? Are they being negative, complaining? Or are they being encouraging, Are they speaking like the things of Christ, After you're done hanging out with them, do you walk away feeling better, than you did before? Do you walk away feeling like you're filled more with life ultimately? And if the answer to those things are yes, then that's good. But if the answer to those things are no, I would encourage you. Maybe you need to find some people in your life who could speak life over you and who are not draining life from you ultimately. And you have to be that person too. Like don't be a person who drains or takes life. Like be a person who speaks life. And as you speak life, I feel like automatically, like you're going to be watered yourself. I think there's a verse on that too. I think like those who water will themselves be watered. I'm going to have to look that up just to like confirm that and maybe put it here. But yeah, like as you do that, you're going to be watered as well. And I just feel better. Like when I'm speaking life, like maybe I'm in a bad place ultimately. And we shouldn't just always hide our pain and our trauma and our sadness. There's a time and a place to express that too. But ultimately, if we do what we can do to set our minds on Christ, ultimately, our hearts will follow that. So yeah, like what are you being fed by? What are you physically eating? What are the people around you feeding you through their words? And where do you feed yourself by the things that you're watching as entertainment?